My name is Nikki, and today I'm going to share with you a very little snippet about transactional analysis. This is a huge topic that was well researched by a wonderful man called Eric Byrne, and some people even do their doctorates in TA. Today, by no means are we covering that off. I'm just going to talk to you about two components of TA that will help you in your relationships with others, your communication with others. Really impactful stuff that has influenced me hugely in how I behave when I'm communicating with other people. So now we're going to look at transactional analysis. As I said previously, this is by Eric Byrne. He's done massive amounts of research around it. I'm taking a tiny little component of it in the context of communication and improved communication and looking at that only. There is heaps more stuff available around transactional analysis. So for me, two components that are critically important about this are transaction and ego state. So let me talk to each one of those. Transaction is a phrase, a sentence, a paragraph of communication, one person to another. Everything that I just said is a transaction. If we were speaking and you said, Nikki, what do you mean by a paragraph? That would be your transaction back to this conversation. So a transaction can be, hello, how are you? Or it can be that whole little conversation that I had. Transactions can be long or short. They are pieces of information from one person in one context or one block to another. An ego state is what Eric Byrne used to talk about us and how we deal with or respond to a transaction. And he's talked about 3 ego states, and every single one of us has those ego states in us. The ego states are parent, adult, and child. So understand, please, that none of these know an age. None of them know an age. An old person of 105 years old can have child, adult, or parent. Parent does not necessarily mean that you have had to have had a child. Parent can be in a 5-year-old, can be in a 15-year-old, can be in a 55-year-old. So these do not know an age or a gender. They only are called ego states because they are how we're choosing to react. So to make you or help you to better understand these, let me say parent, some of the characteristics or the attributes of parent would be forceful, dominance, directive, the way that they speak, the body language and the words that they use would be quite stern, firm, directive, commanding. That is what parent attributes or characteristics are. Could be a little bit bossy, giving direction, using the finger to point, yeah? So those are some of the qualities or characteristics of adult. We would have a more level, rational, focused, interactive ability are the traits of adult. And then when we come to child, it's the playful, it's the naughty, it's the teasing. Could be temper tantrum, stamp my feet, putting my hands on my hips and going, no, I don't want to. Could be bursting into tears, but could also be playful, fun, naughty. So that's what we would say the attributes of child are. And again, let me reiterate, none of these know an age. They are attributes or stages, ego states that each one of us have. We all have all 3, normally a dominant one as well. So when we start to talk about the ego states and transactions in relation to communication, we've got some choices to make. When a parent is communicating, and remember I said that's dominant, forceful, demanding, could be bossy, perceived as quite directive, they have 2 options as to how they would be perceived. Normally we say this is aggressive. The perception is aggression, and the 2 outcomes that they would have could be either parent, so parent on parent, and just think a little bit about what the result of that would be. Parent on parent, both with aggression, could lead to, for us, to conflict. Yeah. Then the parent might also have the reaction of a child. So when I'm parent and dominant and forceful, a child might be the response that I get. So the transaction that comes back at me could be childlike. So they would go, okay, fine, yes, no, I don't want to do that. Or they could burst out crying, or they could stomp their feet and stand their ground and really put their hands on their hips. When we have child communication, we talk about this as passive. So child on child could lead us to have quite a playful outcome. And so we wouldn't be achieving much in the communication space when we've got child on child. Very often when child behaves, another reaction that they might get is a parent one. So dominant, forceful comeback. Yeah. When we have adult on adult, here we say that we have an assertive form of communication. And remember the characteristics and the qualities. They're logical, they're rational, they're focused, they're balanced, they're confident, happy to hear what the other person has to say, to hear input. It doesn't influence their change or change their behavior in any way. And this is what we call good communication. So you can start to see by this explanation that parent, if you choose that style, if that's naturally your style, you will always have only ever two options as a response. You will get parent back, which is aggressive and could lead to conflict, or you would get child, which becomes playful, and that doesn't help us to have good communication. When you're a child, you might get parent, which again is not conducive to good communication, or you might just have a whole lot of fun and laughing and giggling or stamping of feet, but nothing happening in good communication. So the optimal place for all of us to try to be and stay is in the adult space. The aim also is to bring parent down to adult or child up to adult. So when you're trying to have a rational, logical, focused conversation with somebody and they are reacting like a parent, stay as an adult and you have the ability to bring them down to the place where they will behave like adult, where they will interact as adult, and you'll have good communication. And the same for child, bringing them up for good communication. I'd like to share a little story about how I experienced this some years back. We were at university and our professor said to us, we need to go into an environment of an age group, so a kindy or an old age home where we would see people of a similar age group and watch interaction and observe this happening. I chose to go to a kindy and I was with a group of 5-year-old children. The teacher explained who I was. The children started their day by being indoors, colouring in pictures and drawing with crayons in this room. A little while later, the teacher said, children, we're all going to go and play outside now. And so the way that the kindy was set up was they had this covered area that was carpeted with little tables and chairs where the children drew their pictures and sat around and did things. Then there was a covered tiled area, but it was outside the building, still undercover though. And then there was a huge big garden with a lawn area with big sand pits and jungle gyms. So she said, we'll all go outside to play in the garden. All the children pushed their chairs back, ran outside into the garden to play, except for one little boy whose name was Ethan. Ethan picked up his picture and a few crayons and went outside, but only to the tiled covered area, sat down on the ground and carried on colouring in his picture. I didn't think much of it, watched him, stood on the edge of that area, that tiled area, watched the children playing. A little girl called Jody ran back, and she was the prettiest little beautiful girl that you've ever seen. Beautiful curly blonde hair, prettiest little dress with a nice little bow tied around the middle. And she ran back, jumped onto the paved area next to Ethan and stood and said to Ethan, Ethan, we're supposed to be playing in the garden now. And I was like, okay, wow. She was parent right there. She took on the parent ego state. And I thought, oh, this could be interesting. So I observed Ethan and he looked at her and he said, yes, Jody, I know. I just want to finish my picture and then I'll come and play. And I thought, wow, he came back as adult. This would be really interesting to observe. Carried on watching them, and the next thing Jody did this. She put her hands on her hips, she looked down at him and she said, Ethan, the teacher said that we have to go. So she borrowed a little bit of ethos from the teacher, enhanced her being, her presence, by putting her hands on her hips and talked down at him very much more firmly. We have to go and play on the grass. The teacher said so. And I thought, whoa. So she came in as parent. He came back as adult. She came back as parent and some she borrowed. Yeah. And then I was like going, oh, what's going to happen now? Let me watch this. And Ethan said, I know, Jody. I am going to finish my picture and then I'll come and play with you. And now I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to see now? Is she going to take this kid out? Is there going to be blood everywhere? How's she going to react now? And this is what happened. She was in the dominant position and she put her hands down and she said, okay, Ethan, when you're ready, we're playing next to the sandpit on the grass at the jungle gym. And she tootled off. And that is exactly what I'm trying to say. He stayed adult to two of her parent options. He brought her down to adult and it ended well. He finished his little picture, true to form, put his paper on the table inside, ran out and played with them in the garden. So as you can see, it doesn't know an age. Young, old, all of us have all the ego states. Our aim for the purposes of communication should always be to stay in adult, to behave in adult, to react in adult. And when we get either of those, we need to stay and be there. Some people say to me, when we are grown up, I don't want to use the word adult, but grown up, how are we child? What is child? I'm grown up, I'm not a child. And then I'll say, let's think of some examples of when we are still children. As grown up, when we play with a child, when we roll on the ground, when they sit on our backs and we are the little horse and they riding us, when we play and tickle and play with one another like that on the ground, we are, and the child in us as a grown up is coming out. When as an adult we are with a group of friends, we might be having a drink, we might be sharing jokes, we might be teasing other people. That's the child ego state that is prevailing in that moment, at that moment in time. Those are fine if they are not talking about communication and wanting a better outcome in how we're communicating with someone else. When communication comes more interactive and of a serious note where we want to have specific outcomes, then we need to go back to that adult place. When the house is burning down, the office is catching fire, you want to step into parent. You want to become demanding and say, pick up your things and run out of the building now. You want to become directive because the situation calls for it. So that is, all of them have a place and a part to play in our interactions with people and in our daily lives. When it comes to communication, however, adult is the place that we always want to strive to be, to have the best form of communication happening between